with many sages and so forth, he finally rejects all that he has heard and goes himself to what is called the tree of illumination, the Bodhi tree, which is in the immovable spot in the middle of the world. There's a very nice story of his arrival at the Bodhi tree, and I will tell it briefly to ornament this occasion. The Buddha arrived at the great tree, and he stood at the south of it and faced south. And the southern part of the world tipped so that the edge touched hell, and the northern part tipped up so that it touched heaven. And the Buddha said, "This cannot be the immovable spot." And so he moved with his right arm to the tree around to the western side. And standing there, facing west, he noticed that the earth tipped down so that the west touched hell, and the east tipped up. He said, "This cannot be the immovable spot." Went to the north, same thing. Went to the east, and it remained still. He therefore sat there. He said, "This is the immovable spot where all of the Buddhas have found enlightenment." Please notice, all of the Buddhas. He is simply doing what the predecessors of his enterprise had done. Then he settled himself there, and as he was seated, the very being who, in the first story that I had told, said Ahang, named the creator of the world, came against the Buddha. The one who had said, "I." The one who then had said, "I am afraid." The one who then had said, "I desire." I says two things. It says, "I fear" and "I desire." This is the old Oriental concept. So this being came against the Buddha, first in the form of "I desire." And he paraded before the Buddha his three beautiful daughters. And if the Buddha had so much as thought "I," he would then have thought "they." He had no "I," he saw no "they." Temptation failed. The great being then turned himself into a monster of terror and hurled at the Buddha an army. And if the Buddha had thought "I," he would have thought "they," and he would have felt fear. But he had no "I." The army failed, and as its weapons reached him, they turned into flowers, and he was filled with bouquets of flower. Because he had neither "I" nor the desire and fear that go with that, he had, as it were, pushed himself back of creation. He had uncreated the world. He had gone back of that desire system from which the world is created. Now it is this "I" that the Orient seeks to eliminate. It identifies the "I" with what Freud calls pleasure principle, just the drive for desires. In the West, we have a totally different notion of the "I." Those of you who know Freud have read of the id. The id desires and fears. The id, this innocent dynamism of the uneducated, primitive psyche is exactly what is depicted in the Indian myth. But the Freudian ego is not id. The Freudian ego is a function in the psyche that is oriented to empirical reality. It is a function of the psyche that is to realize the unique occasion of I, who was not here before, meeting this situation which never existed before, performing with a sense of personal responsibility on this occasion in relation to what Freud calls the reality principle. Now, this is what I want to stress. In our conception, there is a function in the psyche that is to be dissociated from mere primitive pleasure drive and related to reality here and now. In the Oriental system, there are only two great drives. One is I want, and the other is you must. You must obey the rules and balance your wish system against that until you are brave enough, as the Buddha was, to quench all of these wishes. It is because the Orient has this fundamental concept of ego as being a negative power, as being something that ought to be eliminated, that all of our talk about freedom of the individual and so forth sounds east of Iran as though it were simply sheer materialistic desire talk, whereas that is not what it is. Our concept is the development of an individual. Now let me move west. The Orient has its problems. Relating this, what I would call comparatively primitive concept of the psyche, to the problems of a contemporary world. The problem there is primarily now to assimilate the machine without assimilating ego, to create, so to say, an Asian machine age, where there will be no egos, where everyone will be doing what he's told to do from the great auditorium, not exactly of heaven, but what Nietzsche called the new idol, the state. This is the new God that will tell the individual what his karma and his dharma are. In the West, principally, we have another notion. Now let me turn to the problem of the Western problem of relationships between man and God, and the primary problem of the individual as we conceive it here. I like to take as the most vivid example of the problem of the individual in the Levantine tradition, the tradition of the Near East from which our religions come, the case of Job. Here is a man who has been unjustly assaulted by his God. The text itself says, a just man unjustly assaulted by God. Justice is a human value. It is not a value of the universe. It is not a value of that id. It is not a value of the cosmic order. The cosmic order is an order of mathematical laws. Justice is a human value. Love is a human value. Mercy is a human value. These do not exist in the universe, and they did not exist in Job's God. Job experienced the impact of that tremendous mystery of being in full force, which had no regard whatsoever for his or his community's concept of justice. And imagining that human values should apply to God, he challenged when his comforters, so-called, came and talked with him and said, you must have misbehaved, otherwise this would not have befallen you. He said, no, I have not misbehaved, and I will not say that this has befallen me because I have been untrue to my God. I have been true to him, and this has happened.